forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March.
Again, rebounded by Indiana. The game is over.
For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk,
Oh, he just shook the gravity.
and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
And welcome to this week's episode of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Dace with my co-host, who will never be my partner. Nevertheless, he's here anyway. He is Aaron McIntyre. We represent the two wings of the teams that represented the Big Ten in their respective divisions in the Big Ten championship game. Aaron, it is good to see you, brother. How are you?
Doing all right. Didn't take too long to recover from what happened on Saturday night, which was basically everybody's expectation to begin with. So difficult to disappoint.
Well, let's get to it, if you don't mind. Let's get right to the Big Five on Bigger Ten. Let's start at the top. It is Michigan again. Michigan wins the Big Ten championship for the third year in a row. It is the first time Michigan has more Big Ten titles than any other school, but has never won three undisputed. Remember, we had shared championships in this league for many, many decades. So Michigan's never won three undisputed titles in a row. Ohio State had been the only program in our league to pull that off. Now they have company. The Wolverines have won the last three Big Ten championship games by an average score of 37-8. The game in and of itself was a sleeper. It really seemed like once it was 10-0, and I mean, it kind of seemed like Michigan almost knew the Iowa offense wasn't much of a threat. That Iowa defense, though, man, is something else. Phil Parker, we've known that for years. Phil Parker finally wins the Broyles Award for the top assistant in college football. He probably should have won it like 3 times by now, but he finally won it. So, Aaron, we talked a lot about this from a Michigan perspective and what I thought on the channel here on Michigan Podcast earlier this week. Why don't you give us the thought from the Hawkeye side of things, or just your own perspective either way?
Yeah, I mean, my 3 keys to victory were obviously not followed. That's, the Ebola, mass hysteria, and punting on first down. If they had done that, they would have had a chance. It was one of those games where the expectation, of course, ESPN College Game Day, 3 out of the 5 pickers picking Iowa, notwithstanding, the expectation was basically what we got, which was Iowa football does do or doesn't do what it does, and Michigan does what it does on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I was thinking in more sober analysis, even if Michigan had vomited all over themselves a couple, 2, 3 more times. There was one time with that punt that was a vomit all over yourself punt. You weren't able to watch the game. I don't know if
I saw it about the middle of the third quarter on.
Yeah, I don't know if you've gone back and rewatched. Great opportunity for Iowa in the first half to get right back in it, at least with the field goal fumble. It was just one of those things I had going into this game where it's like, let's just say Michigan comes out and vomits all over themselves. I'm not even sure if Iowa can take advantage. And the one time that they did, Michigan did vomit all over themselves. Iowa could not take advantage. So that's kind of what was infuriating for me from an Iowa perspective. It wasn't really infuriating. It was just kind of a twisting of the knife. Is a couple of calls that just did not go our way. There was the one replay review in the third quarter. I think this was before you started watching, where it was debatable. I believe somebody said the official ruling was that the Deacons Hill's arm was moving forward, but his hand wasn't. I don't know how that works. And so they ruled it a fumble instead of an incomplete pass. And they also furthermore ruled that it was a clear and immediate recovery, which it was not. That was just twisting the knife. There was another call earlier in the game that I've already forced myself to forget. Those were kind of twisting the knife things, but nothing that cost Iowa the game. Man, and I'm just giving them. You gave the Michigan perspective, and hats off to Michigan again. Hope fans are enjoying this run, honestly, because much like my Chiefs in the NFL, these runs, these windows, and it's going to get even harder next year. In the ensuing years, it's going to be harder to do what you guys have done. But just from the Iowa perspective, it feels weird saying this of a fan of a team with 10 wins. You went and played in your conference championship game, it's almost the worst place to be as a fan. Because if you go and hang your hat on, well, you held Michigan to its lowest yards per play, trying to find some sort of moral victory in that Big Ten championship game, held Michigan to its lowest yards per play in the Harbaugh era. You have to go back to 2014 and Brady Hoke for a lower yards per play game or performance. Well, then it's like, well, Michigan was vanilla. So if you're defending your team, and then if you're mad at your team, people come back and say, you guys won 10 games. You should love this. It's just a terrible place to be as a fan because football is a three-phase game. Iowa plays 2 out of those 3 phases really well, except for special teams the last few games. But 2 of those 3 phases really, really well in the last, well, they pretend like it's a 2-phase game, not a 3-phase game. So I don't know. I'll have kind of a query for you on would you rather about where you go next at offensive coordinator, but that's kind of the next thing that Iowa fans are looking towards, if anything can excite them on that side of the ball.
Well, let's look ahead to the college football playoff. Michigan is the only Big Ten team in the playoff this year. Michigan is the first Big Ten team to enter the playoff, number 1 this year. That has not happened during the decade of the college football playoff. Ohio State had been 2, 3, but never number 1. Michigan had been 2 a couple of times, but never number 1. So right now, Michigan is the betting favorite to win the national championship, but oddly enough, is only a 1.5 favorite against Alabama. If you look at the algorithm odds, essentially Michigan and Alabama are the exact same percentage to win the national championship, which means the metrics think whoever wins that game in the Rose Bowl will end up winning the national championship. I'm not entirely sure about that. Texas already beat Alabama once, and pretty convincingly on their own field. And granted, Jalen Milroe is a better player than he was then, but you got to think Texas has probably improved a little bit since the second week of September, too. I think Texas is one team that, watching them quite a bit this year in the Big 12, they have the size up front that a Michigan and an Alabama have. So I don't know that either Michigan or Alabama are going to be able to push them around. Washington does not have that kind of size, but they've got 3 NFL receivers, which means they're never really out of a game. And you saw that this year. Even at times this year when Michael Penix was hurt, they were still able to pull games out. They won a lot of close games this year. So I think this thing is kind of wide open. I think any of these 4 teams could win it. And I guess if we want to be technical about it, Aaron, it's really it's an all Big Ten SEC football playoff because, Washington is just a matter of months away from being a member of the Big Ten. Texas is just a matter of months away from being a member of the SEC. So I think we're going to see a lot of these kinds of playoffs moving forward. I know we go to 12 teams. There's a lot of talk about whether or not the committee will try to, because if we had the 12-team playoff this year, I think we would have had 3 regular season rematches in the opening round. Well, can they, move some seeds around so we don't get that? I don't think they're going to be able to do that.
Nope.
Because I think the Big Ten and the SEC are so going to dominate those top 12 teams, it's going to be really hard to not have any regular season rematches given that. But your thoughts on the field and of course, the Big Ten's lone representative, Michigan's place in it?
So let's go from top to bottom. If I'm Michigan, I'm super pissed at the College Football Playoff Committee. And I know that you said on Michigan podcast, or maybe this was off the air, that, hey, this is great. All the media is going to be talking about Alabama the whole week. You're going to have that added kind of lack of distraction of, having high expectations, what have you, something along those lines. I don't know, man. Alabama, one, they're coached by the GOAT, or at least top 5 GOAT, in Nick Saban. That's kind of a big deal. 2, they're Ohio State with a much more dangerous quarterback and some receivers who have really blossomed, and they can bludgeon just like you want to bludgeon. So that's kind of concerning as well. And then on top of that, I don't know. I think Alabama, they have, especially this year, they have they've kind of reverted back to the old Nick Saban ways a little bit. Now they do have a passing offense that's pretty good, but as I said, I don't know. I think they're just Ohio State with a better quarterback, and Ohio State pretty much took y'all down to the wire despite turning it over a couple of times. So I'd be pretty pissed if I were a Michigan fan. You probably wanted that Florida State matchup, and I know you think Florida State probably should have been 3, which means they wouldn't have played in this game, but I would be super pissed. And now, as far as the number 2 seed, that's Texas, right? Or is it Washington, the number 2?
Washington's number 2.
Washington, the number 2 seed.
Yep.
I don't know, man. I feel like everything past this point is gravy. Last week, the Pac-12 championship game is yet again, and I saw this take, and maybe you talked about it on Michigan podcast as well, saw this take a couple of times that the fact that Florida State's a 14-point underdog to Georgia in the Orange Bowl, right?
Yeah.
That's proof that they didn't belong in the... Come on. What are we doing here? Last week just proved that whole theory false. Okay, Oregon was favored by 10 points. Everybody was just kind of assuming they were just going to kind of waltz through the Pac-12 championship game. That didn't happen. So I feel like if you're Washington, you've got everything here from here on out is gravy. So I would expect them to be kind of loose. Texas, it's kind of the same type of deal, though you know the brand of Texas. There's a lot more riding on this, a lot higher expectations. You're finally back where you think you should be, and that's true. You should be here, and you should have been here more often because this is the first time. So there's maybe a little bit more pressure on Texas. And then with Alabama, I don't know. I think they've got to be pretty confident. This is who we are. We go to the playoff, and we win championships. So of those 4 teams, I'd say Michigan probably has the highest expectations and probably the most pressure on them and the most difficult matchup.
Well, since you broached that topic, let me address it. Last year against TCU, the expectation, Michigan was one of the biggest favorites in the history of the college football playoff. I mean, if you listen to the way the Michigan players talked, well, we know we're going to run the football. They kind of dismissed the whole 3-3-5. I mean, when you give teams at this level, the margin for error, even if you're playing TCU, that TCU team had 9 players that got picked in the NFL draft on it. So the margin for error, man, is so slim that any advantage that you give another team can come back and bite you. And I think TCU hearing for 4 weeks that they sucked, they didn't belong, they're going to get rolled. Michigan heard that too. You know, I'm going out to the Rose Bowl for this game. Cannot wait. It's a no-lose scenario for Michigan. And from my viewpoint, you won the championship, you beat Ohio State. Those are the 2 biggest goals. I'd love to win a Natty, but here's the thing. When we lost to TCU last year, man, I felt empty for like days. We go out there and lose to Alabama. You know what I'm going to do right 10 minutes after the game's over?
Hell of a season.
Hell of a season, man. Yeah, that's my point. There's nothing to lose. There's no shame in losing to Alabama. And in some respects, this game is kind of Alabama versus Alabama. I mean, Michigan is really the old Alabama before Lane Kiffin became the offensive coordinator. And this Alabama is a little more smash mouth than the others, but it still is a much more wide open offense than what they were playing a decade ago. Michigan's playing the way Alabama was playing when Saban first got there. So it'll be kind of fascinating to watch new Bama play old Bama on grass, and let's see what happens. I think Michigan has an excellent chance to win the game. People forget Alabama was 4th and goal from the 31 away from not being in the college football playoff here. You know, so they won by 3 points against Arkansas, almost lost to South Florida. This is not the same Alabama team. It's a very good team. It earned its way in beating the SEC and ending Georgia's winning streak, but it's not the same team. And there's a reason why Michigan's been ranked higher than them all since the preseason poll, all season long. So I think Michigan has an excellent shot, but if we don't, we go out there and lose. We lost to Alabama. No shame in that. That's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, I don't know. When you look at the preseason expectations, what were they, honestly, for nationally and within your own program? It's like, well, you lost you were supposed to go on to the national championship last year. It was national championship or bust. That's the feeling that I got from Michigan fiefdom over there, that it was national championship or bust. And so I think it is a disappointment, actually, if you get knocked out of the playoffs in the first round again, and then you can't tell me that every single circumstance of you losing to, let's say it's a blowout, or let's say it's some sort of mental mistake where it was right there. That's going to sting a little bit.
Yeah. You're not a Michigan fan. You don't know. We've lost a lot of games at the Rose Bowl. We're pretty good at it, brother. We've lost blowouts. We've lost phantom touchdowns. We've lost to Vince Young with the ball last. Every conceivable way you can think of to lose a Rose Bowl, we've lost it. So I'm pretty well versed at losing Rose Bowls. I'm a Michigan fan. That's what we do.
Okay.
We're pretty darn good at it.
I'd love to be tempted with that.
That being
malady.
said, I really like Michigan's chances. I think they have an excellent chance to win the game. Let's look at the rest of the Big Ten bowl selections. With 3 Big Ten teams getting into the New Year's Six.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I couldn't find a fancy graphic for this, so I just ripped it straight off of ESPN's schedule page.
That's as good as anything else.
Minus Michigan, of course.
So you look at some of the other games. First of all, man, props to Northwestern for getting the Las Vegas Bowl. If you've ever wanted to know, and I know you have, you've ever wanted to know how many Northwestern fans would truly travel to a bowl game, now you're going to find out. All right? Because if you're not going to this trip, then you're just not a Northwestern fan. They get to go out to Vegas for that bowl game. Minnesota, because of the APR, got to the Quick Lane Bowl. Rutgers gets Miami in a basic home game in their own backyard there at Yankee Stadium, which should be some beautiful weather for the team from Coral Gables. I'm sure they'll enjoy that post-Christmas. I think who knows who's going to be playing for Ohio State. We'll get to that in a second. I mean, there's so many guys opting out, transferring, leaving, that I think Missouri's got a real chance to win that game and get to 11 wins. Penn State has a chance to get to 11 wins for I think the 4th, 5th time under James Franklin, and become the first team ever to win all of the major bowls, the Cotton, the Rose, the Sugar, and the Fiesta. No team has ever done that. Penn State could become the first, and that's a very winnable game for them against Ole Miss. Maryland and Auburn in the Music City Bowl. Have to think that'll be basically an Auburn home game. You look at LSU against Wisconsin. They've got a history of facing off in bowls in the past. That's going to be at now what's called the ReliaQuest Bowl or the old Outback Bowl in Tampa. And then you want to talk about a contrast in styles. Tennessee and that Josh Heupel up-tempo, ultimate up-tempo offense for the Vols against Iowa, and that Phil Parker defense there in Orlando at the Disney World, right in the shadow of Disney World there at the Citrus Bowl. And even with that tempo for Tennessee, I think the total in this game is still like 35. All right. Mm-hmm. Yep. So your thoughts, just, we'll get into these games more individually and pick them next week. But just a big picture view of the Big Ten bowl slate. What say you?
Man, there's really not a whole lot of matchups that really intrigue me. I would say the number one that jumps out at me right away is Ole Miss Penn State. Differing styles, and styles makes fight, of course, as they say. So that's really one. I mean, Missouri versus Ohio State would jump out to me, but I don't know where Ohio State is mentally right now. There's rumors that isn't there Ryan Day might be looking around, poking around the NFL. McCord got fired essentially. He's a free agent now. I don't know where Ohio State is going to be as a team, and so maybe that should still be a decent game, but I'm not really sure if they're going to give it all they've got there. Rutgers, Miami, Bowling Green, Minnesota.
I think that's a very winnable game for Rutgers. They're basically going to play Miami's third-string quarterback outdoors in the cold.
That's going to be like a 12-10 game, which as an Iowa fan, I've seen enough of those. Bowling Green, Minnesota, and Detroit. Utah, Northwestern. Great opportunity for Northwestern. Utah isn't the same as they've been the last couple of years.
Nope.
That one's kind of intriguing for me just from the narrative of what Mr. Braun is doing. But Wisconsin, LSU, that's going to be a bloodbath, I would think anyway.
Yeah, here's the thing. Even if Jaden Daniels opts out, the backup quarterback there is a very highly recruited kid.
And then this Iowa-Tennessee is going to be a replay of the Hawkslayer Bowl from that was 2014 or 2015 Hawkslayer Bowl. It was the Taxslayer Bowl, but they called it the Hawkslayer Bowl because Iowa just got completely trounced. So really, man, other than Ole Miss at Penn State, there's really not a lot there that super intrigues me.
Let's talk coaching hires. We've had 2 of them in the Big Ten already. Jonathan Smith, who did a fantastic job at his alma mater, Oregon State, which means he's also got a history of coaching the other school in the state and making them formidable. He takes over now at Michigan State, and let's hope this goes better than the last time Michigan State hired a coach named John Smith. That did John that did not go well. I'm really high on this hire. I think he'll do a fantastic job. But I think people need to understand, and I don't know if I'm not a Michigan State fan, so I don't know if they do. This is not a guy that's going to, Mel Tucker this thing in the transfer portal and try to get to 11 wins next year. And this is not how Jonathan Smith rolls. He's old school, going to build this thing from the bottom up. And you might be looking at a year or two, given the current state of the roster, where it still might not be that much better than what you were just looking at. I'm not sure if Michigan State fan realizes that.
Yeah, so we'll get into this on Would You Rather a little bit more, but I think this is probably the best possible hire. I mean, as far as actual attainable hires, this is probably about as good as a team like Michigan State or a school like Michigan State could get. You've got a good track record in Jonathan Smith. As you said, he's got kind of experience in the same type of spot.
Yep.
And, at the end of the day, he's not, I would guess he's probably not going to be breaking the bank. I haven't heard the details of the contract quite yet. But I think that's, as far as attainable hires go, that's probably about as good as you could get.
Then Indiana hires a coach that's got some swagger. Curt Cignetti did a fantastic job at James Madison. Came in, he's already been running smack at Purdue, Ohio State, and Michigan. By the way, those are the final 3 opponents for Indiana on their schedule next year, are those 3 teams. But I think that's a great hire for Indiana. I don't know what they're capable of, in this new Big Ten, given its overall depth. We're talking about they have the second longest Rose Bowl drought of any of the original Big Ten teams. Only Minnesota's longer. Minnesota's not been out to Pasadena since 1962. Indiana has not been there since 1967. But I do think, though, looking at what he did at James Madison, he is a legit coach. And so I think that hire has some potential for them to at least make them respectable.
Yeah, how long has he been at James Madison? Do you know off the top of your head?
I don't know off the top of my head, no.
Yeah, Curt Cignetti. I want to look this up because my worry when you have kind of flash in the pan, so he was since 2019, so that's not really a flash in the pan. So, that's kind of a
so
meteoric.
He basically brought them into the FBS.
Yeah,
is what he
that's
did.
kind of a meteoric rise. So that's something to put on your resume. Hey, I took a school out of the FCS and put them into the FBS, and we went almost. Was he undefeated?
They were in the AP poll a few weeks ago. Yeah.
So that's probably a pretty good hire. Again, as you said, how serious is Indiana about their football program? I think we will find the answer to that. This is part of that answer. That's pretty good. We'll find more to the answer to that question, I think, in the coming next couple of seasons.
Hey, quick bonus topic. You referenced it a little bit earlier, but shocking news, I think, for people, unless you follow Ohio State closely. Maybe if you're a message board guy, you knew it was coming. But I think the rest of us did not anticipate Kyle McCord, the starting quarterback at Ohio State, going into the transfer portal. And you're talking about the 3rd-team All-Big Ten quarterback. He was number 8 in the country in QBR. This is since the transfer portal began. Is this the most high-profile player we've had in our league go into the portal?
In our league, yeah. Yep, I think so.
I mean, it might have been Cade McNamara up until this point, right?
Yeah.
Okay. But and right now we don't know. I mean, Devin Brown, the quarterback he competed against, was not impressive when we saw him play this year. Maybe it's Ohio State, so I'm sure they've got another talented freshman there somewhere. Probably try to get a big name out of the transfer portal. But when I look at what's in the transfer portal right now, I can see maybe 1, maybe 2 at the most quarterbacks that I think are right now clearly better in terms of winning next year. Mm-hmm. Like if I've got multiple years, I want Dante Moore. He was the number 2 quarterback prospect in the country last year. But in terms of winning next year, maybe KJ Jefferson. I definitely think Dylan Gabriel's better than Kyle McCord, but it looks like he's going to Oregon. So I don't know, man. What do you think?
Yeah, I think KJ Jefferson. What a wasted year for him at Arkansas. You hate to see guys that talented just have a year of futility, which is easy to do, which is easy to have in the SEC in that conference. But I think KJ Jefferson definitely would be an upgrade from Kyle McCord. But yeah, it's head scratching until you think that, hey, somebody's got to get the guillotine after losing to Michigan 3 years in a row, and it wasn't going to be Ryan Day this time around. Maybe not. So this, when you put it in that context, it makes a little bit more sense. But kind of.
Can you imagine how wild the transfer portal is going to be in the new EA Sports college football game? I mean, if they want to do
that we can turn that off.
If they want to do a realistic simulation, Aaron, 1,100 players have already gone into the transfer portal this week since it reopened.
Yeah.
You and I are taping this on Wednesday afternoon. The week's only half over. 1,100 players, Aaron.
The last 2 seasons, I kept saying when we've had these astronomical numbers in the portal, I said, well, we're not going to see those numbers for too much longer because there's going to be a number of cautionary tales.
Right.
I was wrong. How many thousands of players, or at least hundreds of players, probably don't even have a scholarship?
Most of them.
Most of them.
Last year, a majority of players that went into the transfer portal did not find. It's like 53% of them did not find another place that offered them a scholarship.
How stupid is that, though? How dumb is that? You go in because you want to play now, and then you never play again. You never play. That's the risk that they're taking. And your scholarship is gone. You're out on the street. You're done. That's just dumb. Something has got to give. I keep telling myself something has got to give with just being able to, hey, the assistant sous chef on the team looked at me the wrong direction or the wrong way, and so I'm jumping into the portal. That's just, again, that's a little bit of an embellishment, but good grief.
Is it?
Maybe not.
Somebody yelled at me. I'm hitting the portal. Let's face it, though, a lot of coaches are using this, too, to cull their rosters. Well, I don't think you're probably going to play here. I think you'd have opportunities elsewhere. Get that dude in the portal and claim that scholarship right back right away. A lot of coaches are pushing kids in there, too, to cull the herd on their own rosters, to cut guys, basically.
Yeah. You reminded me of something, a video that I need to show you, but off the air. We'll do that later.
All right. Let's come back. We'll play Would You Rather here in a moment. All right, Aaron, let's get to it. Let's play some Would You Rather here on Bigger 10. Aaron, would you rather? We already had the 12-team playoff in place for this season as originally planned before the quote-unquote alliance, otherwise known when our former commissioner, Kevin Warren, baited the 2 other Power 5 leagues, the ACC and the Pac-12, into helping him put a check and balance on the SEC so he had enough time to poach USC and UCLA away from the Pac-12?
I would not rather, because of the circumstances that, in hindsight, that was pretty wicked, pretty evil, but it also helped kind of stave off the SEC's aggression. So I guess it's a somewhat even trade-off. But, man, that was stone cold what Kevin Warren did. Stone cold.
It was. No doubt about it.
The SEC was getting a little bit too big for its britches there, so I support kind of keeping them in check.
I did too at the time. By the way, that move for the ACC to join us with that. I mean, Florida State should be in this playoff, but it's why they're not. If we had the 12-team, if the ACC had not joined the alliance and the 12-team playoff were this year, Florida State would be in the playoff. And playing a home game, by the way.
Yeah, more on that in just a little bit.
Okay.
For you, though, if you're Kirk Ferentz, would you rather hire Army co-offensive coordinator Matt Drinkall, who was a Hawkeye player back in the 2002 season, or former Wisconsin head coach Paul Chryst for your new offensive coordinator? Those are kind of the 2 message boards. More on Paul Chryst. Those are kind of the 2 message board wants/rumors.
If Dinkle is going to run the triple option, I'd hire him. I absolutely think. I mean, let me just say it now, because you're going to hear this a ton on this show between now and next September. The odds that teams like Iowa are making Big Ten championship games in the future are not high. And you have to have USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, Michigan, Penn State, and Ohio State. Those 7 teams. I'm not even counting teams like Nebraska, who are top 10 all-time programs. I'm not even counting teams like Wisconsin, who's been a top 5 program in the Big Ten for the last 30 years. Not even counting them. But you need 6 of those 7 teams I just mentioned to all not be in the top 10 in the same year to open up a spot. Good luck with that. And that counts then, that even if that were the case, that you're then better than Wisconsin, better than Michigan State, better than Nebraska. It's really hard. I think you need an outlier. You need an outlier, and that's the triple option. Make everybody play you differently than they play everybody else every single week. So if that guy's bringing the triple option with him, I'd hire him.
That I don't disagree with your analysis about it being really, really hard to compete at the highest levels. If you're a fan of a squad like Iowa or Wisconsin or Indiana or Purdue or even, let's say, a Penn State. Well, no, we'll not. But those kind of middle class to low class Big Ten programs, depending on the year. What's the point of those programs? And then if you're a fan, what's the point of being a fan of them? Because what you're telling me is that you're basically never going to have success at the highest levels of the sport.
I think it's going to be really hard. I'm 50. I think the odds are very high I'll never see Iowa in a Big Ten championship game again.
That's why I was kicking around going to it actually last week.
And I don't say that facetiously. I don't know how many times Michigan will play in it. Like in the old Big Ten, Aaron, in the old Big Ten, it took us until 2021 to make it once. I mean, it's not going to be easy to make it in the new Big Ten, for goodness sakes. No divisions. We don't know what the tiebreaker system's going to be. You know what I think we ought to do? If head-to-head doesn't apply, then put the top two, let the college football playoff rankings. That should be the only other tiebreaker, because that's why we don't have divisions, is because of the college football playoffs, right? Yeah. But there are so many. I mean, there are so many caveats now moving into the future that I think it's going to be really hard, and I think you need an outlier. And I think Iowa, some schools won't do it. And by the way, go back to when Hayden Fry came in here. This is before you, but I remember it well. As I was growing up, Hayden Fry ran an outlier offense. He brought pro-style passing, his exotics. He brought that to the Big Ten. He broke the Big Two cartel by bringing modern NFL-style, pro-style offense to this league. And then when he did it, other programs, Illinois did the same thing, others did the same thing, and we ended up getting from an era where Michigan and Ohio State had a season-long bye to, in the 1980s, 5 different teams went to the Rose Bowl. That would have been inconceivable as recently as 1978 that could happen. He had an outlier. They didn't come in here running the I formation. I'm going to be tough and physical with Michigan, Ohio. No, you're not, dude. You can get your ass run right out of this league if you do that. So he didn't. Okay. Had Heisman Trophy caliber quarterbacks. Iowa had the nation's passing leading offense, the Big Ten leading passing offense almost every year in the 1980s. You need an outlier at these middle schools. Iowa fan is uniquely conditioned to cheer on a triple option offense. You have gone through, since Brad Banks and 1 year with Drew Tate and Ricky Stanzi, 20 years of the worst offense consistently played in the Power Five from an explosiveness standpoint. The most boring, consistently dull offense. I think, what is Iowa finished in the top 70 in total offense once since 2004 or something like that, and that was Stanzi's senior year. You're unique, and by the way, this can be exciting. There's lots of guys that are killer athletes who are 5'9" and 200 pounds who can't play quarterback because they're 5'9". But in the triple option, they can. Just go steal Nebraska's national championship identity that we grew up with back in the day. Steal it from them. Marry that to the kind of defense you guys have been playing since Norm Parker were here. And I think that's very formidable. Very formidable.
It's well said. Having said all of that, though, I don't know if OC, is it Drinkle or Dinkle? It's Drinkle. I don't know if he runs the triple option at all. I imagine since he's at Army, he's the co-offensive coordinator. I imagine he knows how to run that. This one's from you.
Would you rather be the next coach at Indiana or Michigan State?
Michigan State. Expectations are both a blessing and a curse. Blessing in that high expectations means that those are usually accompanied with high amounts of resource and backing and support. Which is where Jonathan Smith is right now. Okay? The curse is if you don't take those blessings and resources and use them and translate that into success, expectations start to turn on you quite a little bit. Michigan State, say what you want to about Mark D'Antonio. He has indwelt that program with high expectations, and those are still there to this day. Mm-hmm. So I think that's both a blessing. At Indiana, there are no expectations. So
that could be a reason why you want to be there.
That could be as well.
So, I mean, Tom Allen went 3-24 in the Big Ten the last 3 years. He's walking away, Aaron, with $15 million. Yeah. In the last 3 years, he won 3 more Big Ten games than you did, and he's walking out with $15 million. Yep. That might be the reason why you'd rather have the Indiana job. But I hear you.
That's true. That's true. But if there are no expectations, then there's every excuse for that athletic department not to really support you as much as maybe they need to. So that's kind of my thinking anyway. Finally, for you, would you rather blow up the ACC or leave it the way that it is in the aftermath of FSU being left out of the playoff? I heard it posited and stipulated and asserted that there is a bunch of athletic directors on the phone with the Big 12 commissioner, Yormark, saying, hey, we got to get out of here. Would you rather blow it up or leave it the way it is?
I'd rather leave it the way it is, but it's going to get blown up. And this was the final death knell. And the irony is the head of the college football playoff committee, Boo Corrigan, is an NC State athletic director.
Yeah.
And if you went back earlier this year, he was the deciding vote in bringing Cal and Stanford into the league. He deserted North Carolina and Clemson and Florida State's wishes. They did not want Cal and Stanford in the league. He broke from that, and he was the deciding vote in bringing them to the league. His school was. Then you turn around and you're the head of the committee, and you can't get in your own champion who's 13-0. And I think Boo Corrigan actually drove the nail through the ACC. I think it's a dead league, and I think as soon as it's breakable, it will be broken. I think.
Yep. That's it.
All right, we'll come back and wrap things up here in a moment. Twitter poll results for this week. Which was the best Big Ten team of the East-West Division era? I chose the nominees. 2014 Ohio State, the only team to win the national championship from the Big Ten during that era, probably inappropriately won this poll with about 50% of the vote. 24% voted for Michigan this year. 22% voted for Ohio State 2019. I will tell you, Ohio State 2019 is the highest power-rated Big Ten team, I think, since Ohio State 2002. And then Michigan 2021 came in fourth at 4.6%. Your thoughts on the nominees that I chose? Remember, I'm just talking about the East-West Division era. Your thoughts on the nominees I chose, Aaron, and then the results.
So I think I would have voted for Ohio State 2014 as well. Trying to remind myself, who was, they had to go through what, Alabama and Oregon. They beat
Alabama and Oregon to win the title.
That's a pretty impressive resume. Although if you're Michigan, my question is, if Michigan goes through, let's say, Alabama and Texas, is that comparable? Texas
probably. Or even Alabama, Washington. Washington's ranked too, so yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just looking at it from a brand perspective, beating Alabama and Texas en route to a national championship. I think this would be closer to 45-45, something like that, or maybe 40-40. But as for now, maybe we revisit this after the season, after the postseason is over. As for now, I think the audience got it right.
That brings us to our feedback of the week from Josh Mustachio. Can Michigan make it 4 in a row and tie Ohio State's record next season? 3 questions have to be answered. Number 1, who's coaching the team? Although that's actually my least concern because Michigan's next coach is already known. It'll be Sharon Moore. It's just a matter of when. There's a reason why you're not hearing his name bandied about for all these other jobs right now. So, and we've got a proof of concept with him. We've already seen him beat Ohio State, so that's a pretty good proof of concept. Then the question is, what happens with J.J. McCarthy? I think right now he's a fringe number 1 pick. I think if he goes off in either one of these playoff games, then I could see him be a solid number 1 pick. And I still don't know for sure that he'll move on. Word is he's making in the 7 figures in NIL, and he really wants to be a captain at Michigan. I think it's a coin flip 50-50 whether he'll come back. And then that brings me to question 3. Who does Michigan then add in the transfer portal to replace him? And who else do they add? But I think, the last couple of years, people have just acted like Michigan's had this team of all these COVID seniors. There's a lot of players that you saw beat Ohio State that have more eligibility. And that's where Michigan has spent its NIL money. It's not spent NIL money on 18-year-olds. It's haven't played any college football. It's spent its money on convincing people like Blake Corum and Zach Sinter to come back to school. And so they're going to make really good offers to guys who are third-day NFL draft picks to come back to school. And I think you'll see a lot of them do that, especially if I'm right about the coaching situation and there's consistency there, whether Harbaugh comes back or it's Sharon Moore. You have any thoughts on that at all, Aaron?
Yeah, never spend your NIL money on 18-year-olds, even if their name is Arch Manning. Just a dumb decision. Dante Moore. How's that working out for you?
Yeah, I'm shocked going to a halfway across the continent to play in a place where you didn't know anybody at all because you got the biggest bag there. Stunned that didn't work out for you.
But you got the bag.
You did get that bag.
That's the important part anymore.
Allegedly. You heard a lot of these players are saying they're not getting the bags. Yeah. I mean, Evan Stewart, who was one of the highest-ranked players in that A&M class that they bought a couple of years ago, talking about, hey, Jimbo made it look like we were all millionaires. They didn't pay me squat. What they promised me.
And that's very concerning, as we talked about off the air. If there's one place where you have as close to unlimited resources, it's Texas A&M.
Yeah.
So if that's happening there, where else is it happening?
With the price of oil per barrel right now, if A&M's not coming through, that's a great point. Good stuff. All right, we will be back next week for a full-blown Big Ten Bowl preview blowout, and that'll be our final show of 2023. Always look forward to that. Look forward to seeing you, hopefully, next week. We'd also look forward to seeing your 5-star review or seeing you share, follow, like the show, whether you're listening on iTunes or watching right here on YouTube. Huge growth again this year. We'd love to see that continue. Please help us to find more Big Ten sports fans just like you. In between episodes, feel free to follow us on Twitter at Bigger10 as well. Until next week, for Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you then.